Hello, everybody. Thank you again so much for tuning in to today's show. My name is Ben Epstein, and welcome back to the Epstein Files. So, we have some important topics here to talk about today. For one, what is the underlying significance of China and Russia signing the Power of Siberia 2 contract? We are also going to discuss the latest numbers behind India's projected GDP growth and what is working for them and what they will need to improve on to fulfill that target, as well as with our stat of the week, the implications behind the upcoming elections in Argentina. So, first of all, I do want to thank everyone so much for adding your comments and your questions in the previous show. And for those who are interested, you can go back and watch the previous show to watch and listen what we talked about. So I just wanted to comment on a couple things that I saw. I don't have the comment here to show, but for one, there was a comment asking about why we made the headline about 1,000% tariffs rather than the actual 135% tariffs. For one thing, the tariffs that the 1,000% tariffs was basically a retaliation from China's Commerce Ministry at Besant's threat of if China and Indian refineries did not buy or bought Russian oil, they basically would implement 500% tariffs, where China came back and said 1,000%. So while obviously a very not very unrealistic possibility, the fact that I even have to say 1,000% tariffs is why we put it on there. And the next question or the next comment that I found interesting in relation to China and Brazil's agreement to on the first EV manufacturing plant there, we see that uh, China initially had all of the initial components for the EVs to be manufactured there. So the comment was raising the question of, is this really beneficial to Brazil because China has the basically controls the initial components they are to make the EVs. And it was actually recently released that the initial components are actually as part of the agreement. It will be added to for myself, or it will be added to Brazil's internal or domestic capacity. So Brazil will eventually be taking over that part from China. Okay. So without further ado, guys, let's dive into the Epstein files. So today's first topic, as I was previously alluding to, was talking about the recent pipeline deal that Russia and China agreed to. So here we can see, or so here to go into a little bit of detail, Russia and China signed a memorandum that they plan on building a gas pipeline from the Yamal Peninsula from northeastern China, which will run through Mongolia, and this is going to be over 4,000 kilometers, and will eventually have the capacity of um, more than 50 BCM of gas per year, where it's essentially going to help double the imports of gas from from Russia to China. So here I'm sharing this map with you guys, and you can see that. Um, Oops, sorry about that. I got to make myself smaller because you guys can't see the map that way. Here we go. So here I'm just showing you guys the map of the pipeline that is going to be worked on here, and it's going from the top of northeastern China, or from the Yamal Peninsula to northeastern China, that runs through Mongolia. And the existing pipeline for the existing Power of Siberia pipeline will reach 56 BCM annually, and this already has a capacity for more than 50 BCM. So, um, the essentially this is designed to double the amount of gas imports from Russia to China, and this actually has a lot of underlying winners and losers both within the current geostrategic framework, but also within the energy markets, which is driving a lot of this conflict, right? So this Power of Siberia 2 project was not initially designed for China. It was actually designed for the European Union. But because of the military operation Ukraine and EU's continued antagonism, along with the United States, towards Russia and China, sanctioning many of their, continuing to sanction their oil facilities and refineries and things of that nature. This right here is Russia and China's answer to these ongoing sanctions. And for China, the fact that they have basically had this drop into their lap, a pipeline that is going to both help import a lot of cheaper liquid natural gas, but also simultaneously be able to uh, uh, diversify its energy away from the United States towards Russia in this case is a massive win for China. And they really did not have to do much for this agreement to basically come into place. So, for China's ability to secure an equivalent of like 40 million tons of liquid natural gas a year, which is more than half of its imports from last year, this is going to be monumental for China for its energy security. But also, when we talk about Russia here, this has allowed them to completely reorient their economy that they initially want to do with Europe. Now they're able to completely pivot itself to Eurasia and the Asian region, right? So now that the Nord Stream 1 pipeline is defunct and the attacks on the Nord Stream 2 pipeline have made it inoperable, the European Union is going to be is a massive loser from this pipeline, from the agreement on this pipeline. And one massive reason, as we've been talking about, is how the Europeans are um, continuously relying on the United States for its liquid natural gas. So here it talks about how the liquid natural gas imports have jumped, representing 48% of all EU gas supplies, which forecasting is about 16 billion cubic meters this winter, is what they'll anticipate they need. But now that this pipeline that was designed for cheap Russian natural gas has now been taken away from them, now their main supplier will increasingly become the United States. Now, after this project has been taken, at the EU has lost this project. Now it's said that the United States will be supplying 70% of Europe's liquid natural gas in 2026 to 2029, which is up from 58% so far this year, because the European Union is trying to ban liquid natural gas, by 2027. So the European Union will be dealing with these costs in the future. Meanwhile, Russia and China will also be having a massive benefit of being able to reorient themselves away from the European economy towards Eurasia. So, in your guys' opinion, who do you guys think won are the major winners and losers in this project? Are there some countries that I think or that you guys think that we should discuss more about this? I mainly am thinking about these three parties, but I think that the United States is also a massive winner, even though they lose the energy demand in China, because they basically were able to completely capture the European market here. So, yeah. So for um so we'll see how the project develops, because one thing that actually needs to be considered is uh similar to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, will there be any attacks on this project. We talked about how Nord Stream was supplying very relatively cheap liquid natural gas to the European Union for years. And um, now that that has basically been inoperable because of a terrorist attack on the on the pipeline. Not to mention the attacks that we've also seen for the pipeline that runs into Hungary, and I believe it was Slovenia. We're seeing that these energy infrastructure projects are getting targeted more and more. So if they are attacked, we're going to find this very interesting because one important part of this deal is actually the Indian troops, amongst others, will actually be helping um, basically guard the pipeline as it's being constructed because um, basically because of what they've seen on other infrastructure projects. So if the United States actually decides to do this sort of insane operation back to attacking these infrastructure projects with prominent partners like India guarding it, that could spell massive disaster, not just between relations between the United States and Russia, China, India, but also just the global energy market and what that could facilitate in the near future. Great. Yeah, thank you all so much for joining me today. And before I move on to the next story, just let me know if you have, please put your comments and your thoughts uh, in the comments section, and I'll be sure to look through them and see what you guys think. Okay, great. All right. So now that we've discussed the winners and losers of the Power of Siberia 2 project, let's move on to our next story that is going to be talking about the release of India's recent economic figures and the focus on India becoming a true engine of global economic growth for the foreseeable future. So, in a recent article published by the IMF, the chief of the IMF actually talked about the development of how global trade and macro economies have basically been changing and evolving since 2024. And one thing that she really wanted to hammer home was that India will be sort of the torchbearer or helping guide a lot of other, lead the global economy essentially into the not too distant future. So here we can see that they are projecting China's real GDP growth to be around a little over 4%. And in comparison to the world right now, the global economy is projected at about 3%. But they're projecting India actually to have nearly 7% of real GDP growth, not for the next coming year, but it'll also be planning on maintaining above 6% into 2030. So I guess when we're talking about why and how India has been so successful, there's a number of different things that I would argue have been the basically what has contributed to their success, right? So, for one thing, I would argue the service sector has been a massive, the largest contributor really to India's growth. So, the service sector right now is accounting for near over half, about 55% of the total gross value added as of the for the forecast year of 2024 to 2025. But even so, even with that much of a share, it actually recorded a over 7% growth in the first year of 2025. So, not just with the service sector, right? We also have important things like India being the global leader in information technology, which also aligns with business services here. And over two-thirds of the industry's revenues are coming from a foreign exports. So, important things like, telephones is something that India has been a high exporter on. and is something that they will, continue to do and want to leverage more for emerging markets. They want to be a huge manufacturer for these products. But we also saw things where, evolutions in the financial sector, but also sort of from a fiscal standpoint, have actually been trending in the right direction. We saw that for one thing, the fiscal deficit for the year 2023 to 24 actually narrowed to about 8.5% of GDP because of the revenue growth from the corporate income taxes and the personal income taxes has been a massive thing. And this, they basically been able to take this money and they were able to move it into important areas in infrastructure spending. So, shoveling a lot of this money into infrastructure development, we've had projects where it's called the known as the Gati Shakti Master Plan, where they want to use this plan for multimodal connectivity that would work on a sort of from a physical standpoint where they're going to be connecting sectors like in sanitation and in water with roads and transportation, but also areas in the financial sector where they're attracting areas in traditional financing, but also renewable energy financing, but also in areas like digital trade. um, that in combination has allowed the Indian economy to really explode because they've been really able to put these multi-pronged strategic approach into action with really actually going about connecting these ports and waterways, these roads. But even with the impressive marks in their, improving their infrastructure, maintaining a dominant stake in the digital and information technology technology space, and also its uh, robust, diverse agricultural base, we can see that India has basically a path that they can use to really sort of explode into exporting a lot more high tech products in the future. So, but when we think about what can happen here, there are a lot of things that can happen that could limit India's growth. For one thing, there's we need to talk about the tariffs, right? The tariffs that the United States placed on India, this whole spat as of were, it's it's been a huge problem for India, and it's been a huge problem for a multitude of reasons. For one thing, India is the biggest India or the United States is India's biggest exporter. And right now it's as of the end of 2023, they were exporting over $81 billion worth of products to the United States. So basically raising these tariffs up to 50% here, where it's been waffling between 15 and 25%, that is going to be it was designed to be a massive hit to India's economy in hopes of India sort of divesting away from Russian oil, right? So obviously, India recognized this, and they were very quick to, for one thing, stand their ground and say that we're going to negotiate a deal based off of um, our own national interest. But they also went about divesting or basically exporting to a lot more trading partners. And we can actually really see how this effect took shape very recently. So here is this article from the Times of India, and here we can see how exports have actually significantly dropped in the from India to the United States between we saw June drop nearly 6%, June nearly 6%, July nearly 3.5% and August nearly 14%, and then finally in September up to 20% of the exports to the United States have dropped dropped like an absolute stone. And you would think that for a lot of the goods that are impacted on these tariffs, like, telephones and, jewelry like diamonds and, agriculture in particular, the United States is using a similar player like they've done with other countries. We know that we're your biggest customer, so we're going to slap these tariffs on you unless you capitulate. Lo and behold, that they decided to reorient themselves away from the United States. And as of this month, they've hit a record number of export partners. We're talking more than 24 countries that India's hit record highs of exports with in lieu of or because of these tariffs, right? And that has been the massive problem. So, for the United States, anyway, if we consider that, um, if we consider this massive tax that it's going to have on Indians, you know, people, them able to find all of these export partners and also reorient their trade away from the United States and find partners in areas like we talked about in, you know, telephones, in agriculture, in, especially services and information technology, they will find their customers elsewhere. And they are taking a hit to because of these tariffs right now. But the important thing is that they have stood their ground and they're properly positioning themselves, exporting their goods away from the United States to customers that will not slap massive taxes on them, such as Japan and Korea and whatnot. So I guess the question I want to pose to you guys is: do you guys think that India will meet its projected growth target of over 6% of real GDP? I'm curious to see what you guys think in the comment section. I think that India it is has always been sort of the teaser, right? With it always has this massive growth potential, but a lot of the things that have been hampering it have been sort of the inconsistency in enforcing the regulations on areas like manufacturing or the size of their entities. A lot of their medium to micro entities have less than 10 people. Like nearly like 99% of these firms are incredibly small because it's a very easy loophole way on the corporate income tax that has been able to generate a lot of revenue for the Indian government. So, how it will also um, uh, bring more females and women into the workforce will also be a very important test, because this has actually been a very good trend for India, that the female labor participation rate has hit towards the 64% mark, which is a incredibly high considering the traditional underpinnings of India's economy, especially with the agricultural sector. So, how skills will continue to evolve in the presence of artificial intelligence, and how um, you know females will continually be involved in the economic process more and more, will really kind of set the stage of India meeting this target or not. So, like, please put your guys' thoughts in the comments, and I'll be sure to spotlight or promote anything that I found interesting. Okay, yeah. So this will be very interesting about India. I think it's awesome to see that they've been able to stand their ground and reorient themselves to not to stand firm to Trump's bullying here. Um, and they've set the stage to really be the leader of global growth in the 2030s. So let's see. Okay, so before we move on to our next story, I want to pose the stat of the week, you guys. So I may have already spoiled it for you guys, but what do you guys is I got to tell you the stat before I ask you what it. The stat is $20 billion. So, what do you guys think the stat for $20 billion is? I'm going to give you guys a second. Put your thoughts in the comment section, and I will. I'm watching it right now, and before we move on to our final story of the day, I'll let you guys have some time to think about it super quick. Okay, just a couple more seconds. All right. All right. So I'm going to call time is up. So the $20 billion, what is that in reference to? The stat of the week, $20 billion, is in reference to Argentina formally agreeing to a $20 billion currency swap agreement with the United States Central Bank, basic in an effort to stabilize its economy from a massive freefall. So this happened a couple days ago. I shouldn't say a couple days ago, but the reason that this is so important is uh, what this is having in the background, right? So here's just a quick photo of Donald Trump and Javier Milei giving a very nice thumbs up. Trump looks super happy giving this guy $20 billion because he did such a great job on keeping Argentina in line here. And this $20 billion currency swap is supposed to stabilize the value of the peso, but basically save the economy from going into free fall. So in the so now to our final story. Um, there are elections actually in Argentina. They're actually happening today, the 26th. And for those who are unaware, this isn't an election to oust Milei here. This is actually this is the midterm elections that are going to decide seats on a third, about 24 seats or a third of the Senate, as well as about half of Argentina's lower chamber of deputies, which is about a little over 125. I think it's 127 seats. And right now, Malay does not have control of either. And here in the local elections, this was an article here posted, on September 8th. We saw that the coalition against, uh, the coalition that Malay led actually beat the opposition 47 to 31%, or 47 to 34%. I'm sorry. But when we think about this $20 billion bailout that happened less than a week ago, it's really going to put into context why this election is so important, not just for Argentina, but also for the United States. So, who is Malay really, and why is he so important to Argentina, or I guess to this plan here for Argentina and the United States? So Javier Milei, he has long called himself an anarcho-capitalist, which is a funny way of saying a libertarian for the United States. That's sort of the comparison here. But he is, austerity galore. He loves cutting. He he cut, tens of thousands of public sector jobs. He suspended 2,700 public works projects. He really rolled back the subsidies on energy, transportation, and water. This was all. This was all in hopes of making to have fiscal austerity. Essentially, he wanted to make a zero deficit budget, and cutting all of this social spending was how he intended to do so. He also cut the number of federal ministries from 10 to 8. So, for one thing, yes, this drastically reduced the deficit and actually got to the point where recently they posted their first non deficit fiscal quarter. But doing so, for one thing, has led to an uptick in extreme poverty. So, as of the first half of 2024, the poverty rate was 53%, which is 25 million Argentinians. And as we can see here, the within the 25 million, 8 million are in extreme poverty. And these reforms that he was doing had basically made life for those uh, either on or below the poverty line a lot worse. Anyone who does not have access to, or basically reliant on these public sector services, which are a lot of people, were screwed, really, because now they are, all of the investment, really all of the jobs that were used for a lot of the work in public sector projects, he subsequently slashed for sake of being frugal, we'll call it. But one thing this is doing, not only making anyone incredibly poor, but it's also leading to a weak domestic demand. I can't imagine why. When you really make poor people poorer, they're not going to have higher demand for some reason, which basically increased the unemployment by 2020, end of 2024 to nearly 7%. And things like cutting these essential services and ruling by decree, as Javier has insisted on doing. He's tried to, you know, there was this omnibus law that he basically wanted to rule by decree to basically deregulate the labor sector, privatize a lot of state owned companies more and more. This has led to a lot of anger, not just within his own party, but also the provincial governors that basically have been reliant on this public sector funds that he subsequently took away. So, all of this austerity measures, while people would say it's just, for a means of being frugal, it's led to incredible social instability. There have been protests. He's even had rocks thrown at him in his most recent talk, really, with protesters, because he's made their lives a lot worse. And when people go on and protest, he wanted to hire, security forces to deal with them forcefully, but also to call out any opposition to how he wants to run the economy as, political discourse, not political discourse, but, enemies of the state, very confrontational, oppositional language, which has not helped him at all, while it has not helped the economy at all whatsoever. So, with all of these protests going on, why would the United States give him $20 billion? Well, for one thing, the austerity measures that were meant to stabilize the peso has essentially made the peso drop like a stone. Here is this here is the latest 3-month yield, actually, of the Argentinian peso to the United States dollar. And you can see here that this was as of September 4th, right? This was right before that article I was showing you about his party recently winning. And then right as we got to about here, October 15th, then you can really see it slide because of this bailout that Argentina got from the United States. And wouldn't you know it, that makes people's purchasing power that much worse. So not only has he cut social spending, but he's also made people poorer times two in a terrible loop because he thinks that this is the right thing to do. And Argentina's already been the biggest loaner of loans from the International Monetary Fund because they've been dealing with a similar problem of expanding debt, a lack of investment, and all of this that basically would have their government collapse unless they were relying on the International Monetary Fund, which is connected back to the United States. There's a book called Super Imperialism, which is really good and goes into that a little bit more. But the point I'm trying to say is that the United States is giving them this money because it will make Argentina that much more dependent on the United States in a similar way we talked about with the European Union's dependency on liquefied natural gas to the United States. But now when you see BRICS becoming that much stronger and that much more integrated in Latin America, the United States doesn't have anywhere really to go other than Argentina. They don't have Argentina doesn't get a lot of investment anyway because of the problems they've had with their economy in the past. And the United States, other than Argentina, isn't giving anyone any good offers really to come to terms with. So for the United States, this election, if they lose it, they could lose really they could lose Latin America completely. And I'm not saying this to be hyperbolic, because once they lose Argentina, who actually was trying to be in BRICS before Milei got elected, and when you consider how much they are integrating themselves more and more as the United States and European Union becomes that much more isolated, we can see that that this election is not just important for Malay to win, it's important for the United States to win, to assert its dominance in Argentina and to basically keep any semblance of influence really in Latin America that they've already lost because of BRICS, essentially, because BRICS is offering a much better model that the United States is. So, what do you guys think in the comments section? Do you guys think that Javier Milei's party will get control of Congress with this election? Do you think that Argentina will? Do you think Milei will be able to survive this loss? Because Trump, and I should have mentioned this earlier, he made an important remark saying that this aid is basically dependent on Milei winning, Milei's party. So this just goes to show for all other countries watching this election, if my aid is dependent on someone that is subservient to me winning, hint, hint, wink, wink. Thank you, Katerina Di Camella. I completely agree with that. It just goes to show that they are stuck. So let me know what you guys think in the comment section about the implications and the outcomes of this upcoming election. Argentina relying on US will eventually lead to its downfall. Yeah, I agree with you, Canarita. It's between that and the International Monetary Fund, the more that they become indebted to them, the more stuck they'll be, because they'll have they'll have a much deeper hole to shovel out of. And um, it was long rumored that when Argentina tried to join BRICS, a lot of the hesitation was because of this massive debt hanging over their head. And for Malay to basically rely on the IMF's, I'm going to call it advice, to show austerity, this is just what we've been seeing for the last 50 years all over the world. These austerity measures, when you're cutting all of these social services and you're going to try to basically decrease the purchasing power of your citizens, make the poorest people the worst off. But simultaneously, it will cause social uproar because you're not providing the essential needs of your citizens, and you're not helping them whatsoever. You could copy and paste a lot of the austerity measures recommended in all over the countries around the world, and these protests and this fallout fall right in parcel with what's going on. So let's see what's going on soon on this. Okay, guys. If there aren't any more comments, I am going to close today's Epstein files. But let me know what you guys think about the topics we discussed here today, about um, the importance of the Power of Siberia two's pipeline that will go between Russia, Mongolia, and China, the numbers and the drivers of India's record real GDP growth into forecasts into the 2030s, if that's sustainable, and also the implications on the Argentina economic bailout by the United States and how that will affect the mid-season elections here. And as always, guys, put your guys' thoughts and comments in the comment section. If I find comments that I find really interesting and really worthwhile, like topics or your guys' thoughts, I will highlight them and I will answer them in the next show. And with that, guys, I'm gonna officially close today's Epstein files. And I do want to thank you all again so much for tuning in today. And as always, I'll talk to you guys again soon.